So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Brilliant Beginnings US Surrogacy Seminar. It's the first one we've done in a while, and it's lovely to see so many of you here. We are recording this session, so it will be available online later for anybody that wasn't able to attend, or if you want to watch back again. Just a couple of housekeeping bits and pieces. If you could put your settings on speaker view, you should be able to see the person who is speaking. I hope that's working at the moment. Can you all see me? Yeah, fantastic. And if you can turn your videos and microphones off if you're not speaking. So I'll very briefly introduce the panel to you, and then if whoever's not speaking can turn off, just to make sure that we're spotlighting the right person. If you have any questions as we go through, please do feel free to ask them in the chat function. We will each give the talks, and then we will do questions at the end. So your question will get picked up and answered. So feel free to type your questions in the box as we go through. I should say as well that I am stepping in this evening for Helen Prosser in the chair. My name is Natalie Gamble. I'm one of the co-directors of both Brilliant Beginnings and NGA Law. So I'm due to speak this evening, but I'm also chairing the session as well. So a big welcome to all of you, and just to introduce the fantastic panel of speakers that we have this evening. We're going to hear from Stephen Ash, who is our Client Development Manager at Brilliant Beginnings, and he's going to talk about an overview of the US process. We're also going to hear from Simon Burrell, who is a dad through US Surrogacy, and his son William may make a special guest appearance, which you could all look forward to. And he's going to talk about his personal experience. We're also joined by Dr. Guy Ringler from California Fertility Partners, who is one of the most distinguished and experienced US fertility doctors in the area of surrogacy. And he's going to talk about the very important issue of maximising embryo quality. And then I'm going to finish up with a bit of a talk about UK law and really kind of what's the latest in terms of what's going on and developments and so on. So we'll each talk for a fairly brief period, 10 to 15 minutes. And then, as I said, we'll have questions at the end. So we're going to start with Stephen Ash, who, as I said, is our Client Development Manager at Brilliant Beginnings. Stephen leads much of our client work on the US surrogacy side. So his daily work is supporting parents from the UK who are going to the US for surrogacy, and there's really nothing he doesn't know about all aspects of the process. But the art of a successful surrogacy journey is often pulling it all together, and Stephen does that with a fantastic kind of calmness and authority, and he's the perfect person to talk you through the overview. So I'm going to hand over to Stephen.
Thanks so much, Natalie. And I noted in your introduction you mentioned William and Simon being a dad. I am also a dad to two children through surrogacy. They are a little bit older, so hopefully they won't be making any interruptions, but if they do, please bear with me. I suppose that really sets the tone for my involvement with Brilliant Beginnings, because I really wanted to come to Brilliant Beginnings and share my own experience. But actually, it's a good place to start, because at the very start of our surrogacy journey, my partner and I, we wanted to have a family, and really the choices were vast, and getting quality and accurate information about the different options, the routes, was really tough and at times quite overwhelming, to be honest. And that was before you had even sort of decided on which country, let alone the ins and outs of it. For any intended parents, it's really key to look at the options for your unique circumstances, and everybody has their own unique circumstances in surrogacy, and finding how that fits in and who can help you on that journey is really key. So tonight I'd like to talk a little bit about, obviously, the US as a pathway for surrogacy, and what some of the reasons why it's so popular in conjunction with the other speakers. Hopefully we'll be able to give you a bit of an overview of everything. So why the US? Why do people choose the US as a destination for surrogacy? There are many. During COVID, obviously the issues around travel and being able to get to the US has meant that many people have paused their thinking, just because there was too many things to navigate. Thankfully, at the current time and for the foreseeable, we hope that travel is open. So actually, what are some of the reasons that people choose the US? It's very well established. Surrogacy in the US has been around for a long time. That means that the processes and the organizations involved with surrogacy in the US are also well established, and there should be quality and professionalism, and accessing that should be reasonably straightforward. The surrogacy in the US is that it is a legal framework for surrogacy, which Natalie will touch on, gives a lot of safeguards to intended parents, but also to surrogates, key to give those to surrogates as well, which is an advantage over the UK in many respects. There is a huge availability of egg donors if that's something that intended parents need. And also, surrogates are well informed, they're well screened, and they're generally very well prepared and ready for surrogacy and the roller coaster that is a surrogacy journey, but they will have had lots of information to ensure that they are ready. So having decided the US, well, I should also say that one of the big reasons many intended parents choose the US is the timescales for surrogacy. And your ultimate goal as an intended parent is to have your family, complete your family, come home with your baby. And the US offers some real advantages over many of the other destinations in terms of timing. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, and how what we see at Brilliant Beginnings in terms of what agencies are currently saying around timescales. So having decided that the US in principle is the destination for you, the next choices are really about, okay, who is going to be involved on that journey with us? And that's really on with you. And that's really key because, as I mentioned, it's well established in the US, but that does mean that there's a huge amount of choice. One of the big things that we want to do at Brilliant Beginnings is filter through some of that so that you can find the organizations that are right for you. On your own, finding the right organizations to help you is difficult. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. It requires a lot of research and time on your part to talk with the different organizations and really do your homework around that. Essentially, the organizations do offer different things. So it isn't a question that there is one lead organization that will fit the bill for everyone. As I mentioned, intended parents have unique circumstances, and looking at what ultimately your goals and priorities and expectations are during your surrogacy journey in the US is really key, because those inform the choices over the different organizations. For example, some surrogacy agencies are very big. They may come across quite transactional, very professional, but actually for some intended parents, that's not what they're looking for. They want a little bit more of a potentially family-run type of organization where there are very, very few people that they actually communicate with. They're very professional still, but it feels a little bit more personal. So that's just one example. There are obviously lots of different things to consider. For example, geography. Are there areas of the US where for you as an intended parent, it might be a little bit more straightforward if the surrogate is going to be based in a particular area during the pregnancy and the lead up to birth? Timescales, we mentioned timescales, and actually there may be a trade-off between your budget and the timescale that an agency is suggesting for a match with a surrogate. For example, at the moment, many agencies are saying that because of coronavirus, they've seen a little bit of a slowdown in the number of surrogates coming forward, but with travel opening up, the number of intended parents have meant that they're not quite able to meet the demands that they used to. And typically and historically, we were seeing before the pandemic, match times of between sort of 3 to 6 months on average for agencies. And many agencies are saying that they're on their way to getting back to that, but actually at the moment it's more like 6 to 9 months, which is still in terms of timing, and when you look at the timescales for the UK, a real advantage. But something to bear in mind, and actually individual agencies will have their own timescales that they can provide you, and finding those out is really key. So alongside the different elements of what do we need out of our organization, there is also the question of your budget. And for a clinic, for example, do we need a clinic that has an egg donor program in-house or strong links to egg donor agencies to be able to provide a good choice of egg donors? And also, how do all of these agencies, clinics, and essentially your attorney as well, which is what you'll need in the US, fit together? And ultimately, what we're looking for is, alongside those priorities and what you're looking for as the organizations, how do they work together? Have they worked together before? And most crucially, have they had experience of supporting international intended parents? Because that is what they need to be able to address very early on in the process and to continue to support with. So in terms of the steps, once, and this is what we do for our intended parents that are on our US pathway, we will talk to them in detail about their expectations with a view to giving them a shortlist and helping them identify their partners. So what are the key things? We've spoken about the surrogacy agency, a clinic to help with the clinical side of things, creating embryos or potentially moving embryos if you already have those in the UK, because ultimately the surrogate is going to be going to a US clinic and will have the embryo transfer there. Also, the final part of the puzzle on the US side is the US attorney. We spoke about the legal framework in the US being very favorable to intended parents and surrogates. You still need a US attorney because each state has its own legal process, and the US attorney will help not only with the parentage side of things, but also in terms of drafting surrogacy agreements. And if you have the help of an egg donor as well, making sure that there's an agreement in place for her as well and the intended parents. The first step, once you have an idea of the organizations that are going to help, is to sign up with the agency. Because what you want to happen as an intended parent is, as soon as possible, the agency is starting to think about you, and in terms of match times, the clock will start ticking for you as an intended parent, depending on what the agency has told you. At the same time, it is a good idea, if you haven't got embryos, to start thinking about or actually making progress with creating these. So if there is a need for an egg donor or moving embryos, or if it's a heterosexual couple that need to travel to a clinic for their own treatment, these are all things that should be happening alongside the agency looking for a surrogate, because there is no reason to wait until, in fact, you shouldn't wait until you have a surrogate and the match with a surrogate to think about the embryo side of things. In essence, surrogates have thought about this for a long time, and by the time they're at the point of being matched with intended parents, they really want to know that things can move quite quickly. So having embryos in place or having them moved to the clinic in anticipation of a match is going to be really helpful and stand you in good stead. Once the agency is aware and knows that you have embryos in place, it is likely to mean that they are able to find a surrogate for you in a good amount of time. And the process of finding a surrogate depends on the individual agencies. So this is something that is important to think about as an intended parent, as to, okay, what does that matching process look like? Do we see multiple profiles, or actually the agency going to do a lot of the legwork and potentially present us with one or potentially two surrogates, because you want to be able to look at those profiles and really have very few question marks over, okay, well, let's just get on with things and let's get going. When intended parents see a profile of a surrogate that they like, what the agency will do is set up usually a match call. So you will have an opportunity as an intended parent to meet with the surrogate after reviewing her profile and that of her family, and potentially meet her partner as well if she has one. After that, there's a couple of key stages. So assuming everyone agrees and is happy to go forward with a match, the surrogate will go for medical screening, and that will happen at your IVF clinic, so the intended parents IVF clinic. And that can take around a month. And then after that, your US attorney will be looking to draft your surrogacy agreement with your surrogate. Once those things are all ticked off and you have medical and legal clearance, then the process can start for the clinical side, which I will touch on. So from signing up with an agency, so let's talk about the timescale from signing up to potentially an embryo transfer, which is the first step on becoming pregnant. It could be anywhere between 6 and 12 months on average in the US. And I think those match times are coming down, so that could improve. But I think in terms of giving yourself some leeway, that expectation of 6 to 12 months is something that is reasonable to that first embryo transfer. In the run-up to the embryo transfer, you will have had an opportunity to get to know the surrogate a little bit better, and hopefully you will all be in a position where, keeping fingers crossed for that embryo transfer to work, but actually there is a possibility that it might take a couple or potentially 2 or 3 transfers is what we see on average to achieve a pregnancy. Again, Guy will have a chat around how you can maximize the success around that, which is really key. Once you are pregnant, the surrogate will obviously be based in her local area, and further on into the pregnancy, there's a real opportunity to go and visit, potentially at one of the big scans, scope out the area where essentially when your baby is born, you are going to be spending some time, and rather than going just prior to birth, you have an opportunity during the pregnancy to have a little look around and find the local Walmart for supplies, essentially nappies and formula if you need it. In the run-up to the birth, obviously we would strongly advise that you get out into the US with plenty of time to spare, usually at least a week, potentially 2 weeks, depending on whether it's a planned C-section, for example. The surrogate will have also given you some steer over, okay, this is how long my usual labours were, and how, from the first contraction, how long things took. So that's definitely important to get, to have a really clear plan around that. When baby arrives, there is a legal process to go through, as we mentioned, and then essentially you will be looking to get home as quickly as possible. And in terms of timings, that doesn't take too long, and with passport offices opening and things like that, that's really helped. So just to give an overview to finish off, because I realise I'm running out of time, just in terms of budget, so that's one of the big stumbling blocks for many people in the US is the cost. So all of these positives do come with a cost. For us at Brilliant Beginnings, we would generally advise a starting budget of around £160,000 is a sensible one, but it can vary. So it could be a little bit lower, potentially it could be a little bit higher if you need multiple rounds of IVF, and embryo creation is a big cost area of that. Also, depending on the area where the surrogate is, the surrogate compensation might be a little bit higher. For example, in California, surrogate compensation is generally on the upper end of what we see in the US. In other states, it might be a little bit lower. Other areas of costs to drill into the overall budget are obviously your agency fees. So whether that's a surrogate or a surrogate and egg donor, those two could be the same thing or two separate things, or it could be the fee for the egg donor, finding the egg donor and screening her is within the clinic costs. Also, egg donor compensation is something to bear in mind. The clinical costs for creating embryos and for medication and screening and embryo transfer are all things to bear in mind as well. The US legal costs we've spoken about. There's UK legal costs, and Natalie will touch on the UK legal process, which is really key and intrinsic to being fully aware of what that is and how that fits in, because there are two legal processes to think about. Other things to think about are insurance. So for the surrogate, they will need insurance, and the intended parents will be responsible for the cost. And then also for your baby. And finally, I think just to touch on travel and accommodation, depending on the number of times that you as intended parents will want to travel over to the US, and budgeting for that, and also the time when in the run up to baby being born and waiting to come home, the accommodation costs there. So that's a sort of real quick rundown of the different things to think about. As I said at the beginning, one of the things that we do at Brilliant Beginnings and NGA is really hold your hand as an intended parent on our US pathway. And that's giving you the practical support at the beginning, but also making sure from a legal perspective, and Natalie will talk about this a little bit more, how we can make sure that at each and every stage, you're having the right advice, the right guidance, and that we set you up with the right people in the US as well. It's important to note that the agencies, clinics and attorneys that we work with in the US, we work with them because they are the best. They are established, they work in an ethical way, they have international experience, and we don't work on kickback fees or referral fees. It is about what is the right choice and the right combination for intended parents. So I think that's really important to bear in mind. I'll finish off by saying, and I know that's a very quick overview of everything, but it really is a joy to help intended parents, some of whom we speak to right at the beginning, considering the choices that I spoke about, not just about the US, but where and how do we do surrogacy, but then to take them all the way through and see them come home with their baby is really special. So something that I really love to do.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Stephen. And that leads very nicely and appropriately into Simon, who is our next speaker, who is a dad through surrogacy to William, who was born in 2019. It's been our absolute pleasure to support Simon all the way through his journey, right from the very beginning stages to the end and the grant of his parental order and birth certificate for William. So we feel like he's part of our family, our wider extended family. And I know that, you know, I've heard him being interviewed on Radio 4 and in The Guardian about his experience. And I know, you know, how movingly he speaks about how important and what it's meant for him to be able to create a family as a single dad. So Simon, thank you for coming in and sharing your experience with us all. And I'm going to hand over to you to tell us a bit more about your story.
Yeah, thanks very much, Natalie. And hello, everyone. I thought we thought it would be helpful if I tried to answer a number of questions that might be going through your mind. But before doing that, yeah, I definitely benefited so much from the help and support that I got from all the other speakers that you're going to be hearing from tonight, and I'll say a bit more about that as I go through. Yeah, tremendous help from all of them at every stage of the journey. So the first question I was going to address is, you know, what brought me to surrogacy specifically. I guess I'd always wanted a family. I wanted one for years, but you know, it wasn't a reality for me as a gay guy in the, you know, early 90s. It just was never even something that seemed possible. Then gradually it did come on the horizon as something that could happen. And I hoped that it would happen kind of organically, that I'd meet a partner, we'd be settled, we'd both want a family. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And so I found myself in middle age facing the situation where, well, if I was going to be a parent, I needed to get on with it. Adoption seemed to be a longer process. And also I wasn't sure that I would be necessarily as good a dad, because my sister, when she'd had her children 20 odd years ago, had, you know, presented me with, here's a nephew kind of thing. And I remember the first time I saw her eldest child, and there was this kind of immediate bond, a sort of a sense of your own gene pool that you're looking down into. So I think, whoops, sorry, that's William, my little one, deciding he wants to come and play with the laptop. So yeah, I wanted my own biological child, and surrogacy seemed the way forward. And I did a certain amount of research around the topic. I started off with, I found a document that had been prepared by the Stonewall Agency. Oh dear, poor little boy, what's the matter? Are you getting all frustrated a bit? Look, sorry, I'll just try and get him reoriented to his favorite TV show. Look, it's Mr. Tumble, you're gonna go and have a look. Sorry, yes, I found a Stonewall document, which was a sort of guide to surrogacy for gay men, which mentioned a number of agencies. One of them was Brilliant Beginnings, and I Googled them and read the other websites. Brilliant Beginnings looked, you know, the more, I don't know, sort of, I was more drawn to it. Rang them up. They were very helpful. I had a couple of initial meetings, and really decided from there that I wanted to go on this surrogacy journey, and to do so in America. At that point, it was very difficult for singletons like myself to use the UK domestic surrogacy option, but I was even though I didn't have a choice, I was very much drawn to the benefits of the American surrogacy process, which I think Stephen touched on a moment ago. And once you're out there, I mean, you realize just how experienced they are, particularly in California, where they've been doing it for years, and it's so well regulated. So you have that kind of comfort of being a part of a process that really works well when you're out there. So once I decided to proceed with Brilliant Beginnings, Stephen put together a document which contained 3 kind of groupings of surrogacy agencies, fertility clinics, and attorneys. And as he mentioned, there are different kind of styles and ethoses and so on among these agencies, which might fit different people in different ways. So he included links to the various places, so I was able to read through their websites and so on, and narrowed it down to 2 out of 3, and then chatted to Stephen. And by that stage, he'd met me a few times and was able to have a good idea of which of the 2 packages or groups I was most likely to fit with, and he was spot on, actually. So that was how I go. Sorry, he's here again saying hello. So that's how I was put in touch with Dr. Ringler's clinic, and Dr. Ringler himself, West Coast Surrogacy, and an attorney called Michelle Keys. All of them turned out to be fantastic choices. I can't speak highly enough about them all, really. And eventually, after roughly, I can't remember now whether it was 9 months or a year, I was at the point where I was being shown profiles of potential surrogates. And it was the 3rd one I saw that I was really drawn to. It's very hard to say why or what particularly drew me to that profile. Like so much about looking at profiles for donors, if you have to, and surrogates, I think you just have to trust your instincts, you know, and something about that 3rd profile spoke to me in some way, and so a meeting was set up of the kind that I think Stephen mentioned. And because the agency really do know what they're doing, that match call was so well structured. The person from the agency that ran it went through a number of sort of discussion points that experience had shown them were the things we should be talking about. And at the end of that call, the person running it said, well, I'll give you guys, you know, some time to think about whether you want to match with each other or not. But I remember at that point thinking, well, I really don't think I need time to think about it. We just kind of clicked in the course of that call, and we seemed to be very much on the same page in relation to all of those discussion points that the agency had asked us to cover. So as soon as I was called by the person at the agency that had run the call, I just said straight away, I don't need any time to think. Yeah, please. And she said, well, I'm very glad you said that, because I've just had a very similar call with the surrogate. So at that point, yeah, I was very excited that that this was going to happen, and that there was going to be this potential journey with someone that seemed to tick all the right boxes, for want of a better expression. Then, of course, the next stage after the legal process of the agreements being sorted out and so on was the cycles, the trying to get pregnant. I won't say too much about the legal process, because for me it was just very smooth. I mean, it just, like everything else, the professionals that were involved were so professional, so helpful, that in hindsight it all just seemed to happen quite smoothly. Although at the time, of course, you know, everything seems to be a bit more high stakes than perhaps it seems in hindsight. But having gone through the agreement process, it came to embryo transfers. As Stephen mentioned, it sometimes takes more than one. In my case, it was the second cycle that turned out to be the one. So after a few days, you're given an initial indication that, it seems to be positive, which is obviously great news. But then that's followed up a few weeks later by an ultrasound to test for a fetal heartbeat. And that's an incredible point, or it was for me in the journey. I was actually out on the evening when the scan results were due with some friends. We'd gone to the theatre, and in the interval I sort of rushed out, checked my phone, and there was this email that said, congratulations. And that was really good news, obviously. But then even better, because I hadn't noticed there was an attachment, because I'd just checked my phone really quickly during the interval. The next morning, I went to look at it again, and I saw that there was an attachment, a WAV file, and I didn't really know what it was. So I clicked on it, and then I just heard this heartbeat. It was an extract from, the recording from the ultrasound, and that was incredible. It really tugged on the heartstrings. It's real. It's happened. There's this little being with a heartbeat. Such a great moment. Yeah, from then on, again, in hindsight, it all seemed to go so smoothly. Although, it's easy to say that now when, I've got a child that's nearly 2 years old. At the time, obviously, you get, because it all matters so much, and you've got so much emotionally invested in it. It's hard not to kind of be thinking all the way through the process, what's going on, what's happening, is everything okay? But as I said before, everyone who was involved was just so professional, so helpful. There were moments when I did get a bit wobbly, and then Stephen was on hand, as well as people in the in the Californian agency. And I think, as Natalie may have said, yeah, he's very calm, very authoritative, just such a help at those points to sort of help you see everything calmly, talk through the options. There was always a solution, there was always a strategy. If there were any sort of points where I felt that I wanted something to be asked or whatever, but I felt that it might be a difficult subject to broach with the surrogate, Stephen would ring or set up a video call or something, either with the surrogate herself or with the case manager that was helping both the surrogate and myself at the agency, and it would all smooth itself out. As well as those kind of conversations through Stephen or the case manager from the agency, I'd also developed a good ongoing relationship with the surrogate. We emailed each other regularly. It was hard to phone because of the 8-hour time difference between here in California, but we kept in touch regularly through email, and it was great. There was kind of it was weird. We hadn't met in person at that point, but there was kind of this feeling that I knew her, that she was like a friend kind of thing. It was a very friendly tone in the emails. She kept me up to speed with everything. Every time there was a scan, as well as getting a report from the manager, the client manager at the agency. The surrogate herself would send me scans of the pictures from the ultrasound or whatever, and tell me what the obstetrician had said. So that was all great. The only slight fly in the ointment with the process was that, oh dear, William, who's getting a bit vocal, was 2 weeks early. So as Stephen said, it's always a good idea to arrange to go out 2 weeks early. Unfortunately, William decided to be born on Boxing Day, when his due date was the 10th of January, and I was planning to fly out on the 29th, I think, of December that year. So I had one of those frantic kind of journeys straight out of trains, planes, and automobiles, where I'm desperately trying to get from Brighton to Palm Springs in California on Boxing Day. Not the easiest of things, but I got there, and my little boy for the first time and wasn't quite so vocal then as he is now. Apologies that no, I think everyone can hear you. I had planned, I'd sorted out accommodation and so on in the local area, and thank goodness I had, although I had to change the dates of it very much at the last minute. We were there for about 5 weeks, I think. It's very straightforward, like everything else. I'd been given quite detailed guidance in advance. I was given an overview of the process at the beginning, which was helpful, but not given all of the detail because there's too much to get all in one go. But I knew roughly how the process would work, that I had to wait for William's birth certificate, then apply for his American passport, because of course, being born in America, he's got American citizenship. That all went fairly smoothly. If you do end up having a child in California, a good thing to know is that there's a state requirement that all birth records have to be completed within 3 weeks. So even if other agencies are saying, oh, you know, no news yet, or you've got to wait, after 3 weeks, just go straight to the county vital records office and they'll be able to give you the birth certificate. And then you can apply for the passport and come home. While I was out there, Natalie and her office had already started the process for applying for a parental order here. Again, as with all the other stages, I was fully supported by Natalie and her office that made everything go really smoothly. When I was, learning how to be a dad, the last thing I needed was to have to deal with that myself. And, Natalie dealt with all of that really professionally. Both she and those in her office, really, really helpful, really friendly at all times. And it ended up with an online hearing where I got the parental order, which was fantastic, a really proud moment. I'm still in touch with the surrogate. I'm referring to it that way. I mean, it sounds a bit impersonal, but one of the things in the contract was that I had to respect her privacy, so I'm, not using her name in this. But yeah, we're in regular contact. We send each other pictures on Messenger of our families and what we're doing and all that kind of thing. Once travel eases up and William's going to be able to travel for 11 hours or whatever it is on a flight to California, I'm hoping that we'll go out there and be able to catch up with the surrogate and her family. I've gone on for ages. Sorry about that. It's been a bit whistle stop, but those were the questions I thought it might be good to cover. I've had to do it very briefly, but the whole process was great. And as I said before, I can't speak highly enough of the help and support I got at all points from Dr. Ringler and his office, Natalie and her office, and Stephen and Brilliant Beginnings. So great thank you to all of them.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Simon. It's so lovely to hear from you. And I think we'll invite William to do the next seminar that we do. So I can't wait to kind of get to the point where some of the children that we've helped conceive will be kind of old enough to tell their own stories. But there's kind of growing numbers of them. So hopefully it won't be too long. But it's lovely to hear the kind of the real story from the horse's mouth, where you've kind of been through it, and hopefully give some hope to some of the people that are listening that they can get there too. So thank you very much. And just a reminder to everybody that we're all very happy to answer questions. If you want to put them in the chat function, we'll pick them up at the end. So please don't be shy and feel free to log your questions. So my next speaker that I'm going to introduce is Dr. Guy Ringler, who, as I said earlier, is from California Fertility Partners, and we're really privileged to have him here. He was one of the very first doctors in the world to help gay men start families through assisted reproduction. And he has been at the forefront of dealing with surrogacy treatment in the US for as long as I've been doing this, and longer, which is saying something. He was awarded a Family Building Award by the American Fertility Association and named a super doctor by Los Angeles Magazine. So you couldn't be in better hands to hear about the best ways of maximising embryo quality. So Dr. Ringler, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Natalie, and a special thanks to Natalie, Helen, and Stephen for inviting me to participate today. I'm very happy to be here and talk about an important topic. If this is what I do all day, I feel like everything we do is to optimize embryo quality to give my patients the highest pregnancy rates. Our goal is for you to get pregnant on the first embryo transfer, and it doesn't always happen, but it's really, that is our goal. And it takes a team of professionals to bring these complex cases together to make it happen. So I would just like to review what the factors affecting IVF success rates in general. Patient age, the age of the woman producing the eggs, has a profound effect on the egg quality, the egg genetics, and the overall success rates. The embryo euploidy, what does this mean? In most of our cases today in the US, we do genetic testing of the embryos prior to transfers. We'll know if they have the correct number of chromosomes or not, and that has a significant impact on the overall pregnancy rates and miscarriage rates. Egg quality and quantity, we're going to talk about that in more detail. The sperm quality. And of course, the IVF laboratory, where we put the eggs and sperm together and we culture the embryos over the course of 6 days. That environment has a significant impact on that embryo's development. And then once we have these high quality embryos, we want to put it in the perfect environment. With surrogacy, the surrogates are very carefully screened and to provide this optimal environment for implantation, for carrying the pregnancy to term. So let's talk about eggs a little bit. The factors affecting egg quality include age, as I mentioned. We're encouraging more and more younger women to freeze their eggs for the future because their age has such a profound effect on their overall fertility. A woman is born with all the eggs that she'll ever have. Every month, a group are recruited. From that group, one ovulates and the other ones fade away. So the total number of eggs remaining in the ovaries decreases with age. If we can freeze the eggs of a younger woman, woman is able to preserve her fertility, the health and quality of those eggs for use at a later point in time. Lifestyle can have a significant impact, including diet, exercise, stress, smoking. So I always encourage my patients to take steps to try to optimize their health and their egg quality. Body mass index can affect egg quality. And lastly, ovarian stimulation. We're going to talk a little bit. How I stimulate the ovaries can have an impact on egg quality. So my partners and myself spend a lot of time reviewing a patient's prior treatment cycles to see what the ovaries like, what they don't like, and to see if we can make changes that may have an impact on the egg quality and embryo quality. So what is it about aging in women? As I mentioned, with advancing age, the total number of eggs decreases. So we call this ovarian reserve. So in most of our patients will do a blood test of ovarian reserve called anti-Mullerian hormone. And that reflects how many eggs are remaining. And it's very predictive of how many eggs we can expect in an IVF cycle. In an IVF cycle, we hope to get as many eggs as we can because each egg is a potential normal embryo that we can preserve for the future. In general, the overall egg quality decreases with age. And the egg has lower levels of mitochondrial DNA and energy, which is thought to be a factor in why, as a woman gets older, more and more of the eggs have genetic abnormalities. And studies have shown a reduced level of antioxidants in the follicular fluid. Smoking for a long time has known to have a negative impact on egg quality as well as ovarian reserve. Smoking can decrease IVF pregnancy rates in half, increase miscarriage rates by increasing oxidative stress, which causes damage to the eggs. It's recommended that a woman who is smoking to stop for 3 to 6 months to reverse this impact of smoking on the egg health. So antioxidants can be helpful. And I recommend that all my patients going through treatment, whether it's for freezing their eggs or to create embryos for themselves for the future, for fertility procedures, start on antioxidants. Antioxidants decreases oxidative stress in the cells, which can help improve egg quality. Coenzyme Q10 is a powerful antioxidant. In animal studies in rats, it's been shown to decrease the signs of aging. The dose recommended is 200 milligrams 3 times a day. Natural sources of antioxidants include pomegranates, berries, green tea, chocolate, not too bad, oregano, turmeric, and ginger. Diet can be impactful. A Mediterranean diet with fruits and vegetables, more fish, chicken, less red meats has been shown to improve fertility. Monounsaturated fats have been correlated to higher quality eggs, higher quality embryos, and increased birth rates. Conversely, polyunsaturated fats can have a negative impact on embryo quality. So how you live your life, the foods that you eat, your lifestyle, diet can impact the overall egg quality and embryo quality. In our IVF treatment cycle, we want the highest quality eggs to give the IVF laboratory to use to create embryos. Stress has a known negative impact on IVF success rates, and psychological intervention, stress reduction techniques have been shown to have a positive impact on IVF success rates. I mentioned earlier how ovarian stimulation can impact egg quality and IVF success rates. And this was an older study. Many of you have probably heard the term mild stimulation or minimal ovarian stimulation for IVF. What this is essentially is a lower dose medication of using the least amount of medication to get the eggs to maturity without overcooking them. In our program here, we feel very strongly about very careful monitoring of the follicle development in an IVF cycle. We don't utilize ultrasound technicians to make the measurements. We do those ourselves because I make important clinical decisions based upon that data. If we remove the eggs too early, they'll be immature, they won't fertilize. If I remove them too late, I can decrease their quality and potential pregnancy and embryo quality. And this study just compared minimal stimulation to standard stimulation. They retrieved more eggs with the standard stimulation, but they had a lower aneuploidy rate with the mild stimulation. So this was one of the early studies showing a potential impact of mild stimulation. So for men, we start with the basic semen analysis, and the semen analysis tells us the quantity of quality of sperm. It's always interesting when I meet with my gay patients, I ask if they've ever had a semen analysis. Of course, no one ever has because there's no need to. But a semen analysis gives us good information on the quality of the sperm. And I always like to obtain one in the very beginning, because if the quality is suboptimal, there's things that we can do to improve sperm quality that ultimately will improve embryo quality, which is our goal. So we look at the concentration, the motility, and morphology. Next slide. Things that can cause damage to sperm include certain medications, varicocele, which is a large dilated vein in the testicles, smoking, air pollution, all can cause oxidative stress, which is an imbalance between oxygen-free radicals and antioxidants. And these free radicals can damage sperm membranes, can damage the DNA, all leading to infertility. Now, today in IVF, where the embryologists can do amazing jobs of achieving fertilization, even in men with very low sperm numbers, but if that sperm is not healthy, you can still see some negative impacts of the sperm's DNA once that egg has fertilized. In that, we'll see lower blastocyst formation, lower number of embryos that are usable, lower pregnancy rates, and higher miscarriage rates. Next slide. A useful test in men with abnormal sperm parameters is the sperm DNA fragmentation to give us evidence of the integrity of the DNA of the sperm. There's a term called DNA fragmentation index, or DFI. Low DFI is good. High DFI means sperm damage, resulting in lower pregnancy rates and higher miscarriage rates. Next slide. Men are affected by age as women. There are a decrease in sperm parameters in men over the age of 35. We see decreased blastocyst formation and pregnancy rates, and an increase in sperm DNA fragmentation in men with aging. And that can cause an increase in aneuploidy. And there are studies documenting an increased risk for autism and schizophrenia in men over the age of 40. Next slide. Factors affecting sperm quality include alcohol. Excessive is bad. Moderation is okay. Certain medications, Propecia for hair loss, and some men will see a decrease in sperm concentration motility. Testosterone is a big no-no. Testosterone can literally turn off sperm production, causing the sperm to go to zero in some men. And you want to avoid steam rooms, jacuzzis, and anything that increases heat in the testicles can decrease sperm quality, ultimately leading to decreased embryo quality. Next slide. In men as in women, diet and exercise, lifestyle factors can affect sperm quality as in egg quality. Exercise is helpful in moderation, improves blood flow to the testicles, which can improve sperm quality. Excessive exercise can have a negative impact. The professional athletes I see often have a sperm component related to their excessive amounts of exercise. Antioxidants are helpful for sperm quality. They can improve sperm motility and lower sperm DNA fragmentation. Next slide. So for my patients with sperm issues, I give fertility supplements. Omega-3 fatty acids improve blood flow to the testicles, can improve sperm quality. Vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant which can improve motility and decrease oxidative stress in the sperm. Coenzyme Q10 can improve sperm motility. The dose for men is a little bit lower for women than in women. It's 200 milligrams twice a day. And folic acid can improve blood flow to the testicles. Next slide. So ultimately, our goal is to produce high quality embryos. So this is a photograph from our laboratory of 2 blastocysts. So the day of egg retrieval, the egg is inseminated with sperm. The next day, day 1 of culture, it's a fertilized egg or 1-cell embryo. Next, they're kept in the laboratory undisturbed until day 5. And between day 1 and days 5 to day 6, about 60, sometimes 70% of those 1-cell embryos will grow into a 100+ cell embryo called a blastocyst. And this is the developmental stage an embryo must reach if it's going to have a chance to implant and start a pregnancy. We can freeze it directly once it becomes a blastocyst, or more often today we'll biopsy it for genetic testing, pre-implantation genetic testing, PGT, also referred to as PGS. In that procedure, the embryologist is going to remove 3 to 6 cells from the outer layer of this embryo, freeze the embryo, the cells go to the genetics lab, and they'll tell us whether or not that embryo has the correct number of chromosomes. Next slide. And this is some data on the results of PGT testing. This shows the percent of euploid, that means normal embryos, in egg donor cycles. Egg donors are generally in their mid-20s, and we find about 60% normal embryos. That also means that 40% are abnormal. So even in young women in their 20s, a percentage of those eggs in a given cycle, percentage of those embryos will be genetically abnormal. Next slide. As women get older, that percentage of abnormal embryos increases, so that in women ages 35 to 37, we find about a 44% normal rate. Next slide. And look what happens over the age of 40. Women ages 41 to 42, we have a 17.6% normal embryos. So in older women especially, it's helpful to if we could retrieve more eggs, to have more embryos for biopsy, to have a greater chance of producing a genetically normal embryo from that cycle. Next slide. Now, at the time of biopsy, all the embryos are given a grade. They have a numerical grade, which reflects their degree of expansion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then 2 letter grades. The first letter grade describes the appearance of the future fetal cells, which are here referred to the inner cell mass, A, B, C, and D. And the second letter grade refers to the outer layer of cells, which are the future placental cells, A, B, C, D. Now, just to go back, when we biopsy an embryo, we're removing the future placental cells, the outer layer of cells. We're not touching the future fetal cells because we don't want to cause any damage to those. Next slide. Several years ago, we made a change in our IVF laboratory. We're constantly evaluating ways to improve our number of blastocysts and the blastocyst quality and ultimately the success rates. The IVF laboratory is a very controlled environment. We have a purified air system in our IVF laboratory. The incubators are finely controlled for temperature and pH, all to give those eggs, sperm, and embryos the greatest environment to begin their development. So several years ago, we changed our culture medium from a sequential medium where we would change the medium in the dish after 3 days of growth to a single culture medium where the embryos are looked at the day after egg retrieval for signs of fertilization and then kept undisturbed in culture until day 5 without changing the medium. So the single culture medium provided all the nutrients, growth factors they needed for the full 5 days. And theoretically, what this does is it takes away that step where you take the petri dish out of the incubator to look at the embryos, change the media. So even though that may just be a couple of minutes, changes in temperature and pH that can occur could have a negative impact on that embryo's development. And that's what we found. We found improved blastocyst formation, improved quality of blastocysts, and improved pregnancy rates by this little step in our IVF laboratory. Next slide. So I know I've talked about a lot of subjects, a lot of topics in this talk, but to summarize of how we can optimize embryo quality and your pregnancy rates. First of all, to start at a younger age, of course, none of us can go backwards in time, but for young women who are considering their future fertility, egg freezing is a great option, and men may want to freeze sperm for the future. I'm seeing more and more couples today that want to postpone having children but want to freeze embryos for the future. Healthy lifestyle, including a healthy diet, watching your body weight, can have an impact. So I always try to make a partnership with my patients at the beginning to make changes in lifestyle, diet to help improve quality ultimately of their embryos. We supplement freely with antioxidants, omega-3 fatty acids, careful selection of the ovarian stimulation protocol for both egg donors and women who are using their own eggs. If our patients have cycled previously, we review all their stimulation cycles to see what was used, how they responded, to see what changes we might make that can help lead to a higher quality egg, higher quality embryo. And of course, a proven IVF laboratory culture system. I have an amazing team of senior embryologists who do beautiful work. PGS or PGT, as I mentioned, 99% of our patients do PGT to test the embryos, which will tell us if they have the correct number of chromosomes or not. This information is very helpful in the selection of the embryos for transfer. And then lastly, an optimal uterine environment. So our topic today is surrogacy. And for my patients needing surrogacy, I screen the surrogate very carefully to make sure that they can provide this optimal environment for implantation and carrying the pregnancy to term. Next slide. And I think that's it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's fascinating kind of how much detail kind of affects the quality of embryos at every tiny little step. And it's kind of so helpful. And I'm sure encouraging to hear that there are things parents can do to help themselves as well. They're fabulous slides, fabulous talk. So we're going to finish up. I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about the UK legal side of things. And really what I wanted to do is kind of give you a flavour of the latest in terms of what's been happening. And it's obviously been a very turbulent couple of years with COVID, and that's thrown all sorts of things all around the world into flux. But it's also had an impact on how the UK legal process works if you're thinking about going overseas for surrogacy. So the first thing to say just about the service that we offer through Brilliant Beginnings is that it is a holistic pathway where Brilliant Beginnings and NGA law both work together to make sure that each step of your journey is managed. So with our US surrogacy pathway, that means that you will have a legal manager from the NGA law legal team as well, and they will be with you all the way through your journey. So we start with legal advice at the beginning. We will review all the documents that you're preparing in the US, working with your US attorneys there. We will help make sure that your wills are up to date. During the pregnancy, we will get you ready for travel ahead of the birth, so that you know what you need to do to get your passport to bring your baby home through immigration control. And then we will help you through your parental order application. And the parental order is the legal stage on the UK side, which makes you your child's legal parents here. So in the US, the legal side of things is dealt with in a very upfront way. So you'll have an agreement at the start and you'll be the parents on the birth certificate. But UK law takes a bit of time to catch up, because initially the surrogate will still be treated as the legal mother as far as the UK is concerned. So there's a separate court application that you make after the birth in order to bring UK law into line with the position that's in the US. So a surrogacy journey doesn't just end with the birth. We will be there to kind of help support you all the way through to the end, and making sure that your legal position here is fully secure as well. So that's something that we have been doing for the last 18 months during COVID, and international surrogacy and surrogacy in the US has not stopped because of the pandemic. It's been ongoing throughout that time. But it has presented us with additional challenges that we would never have anticipated in 2019. And we as a team have very much been on the front lines of that, and helping parents that were already in the process having to navigate and find solutions to some of those problems. But one thing that's really good is that some of those solutions have, I think, had a lasting effect in terms of the way things work. So a lot's changed over the last year or so. So first of all, I mean, one of the big challenges that parents were facing were the travel restrictions around moving from the UK to the US. And for most parents going through surrogacy, they'll want to go out, not just for the birth of their child, but also during the process as well, either to leave a sample or to access fertility treatment services, or to meet their surrogate and attend a scan. And once the travel restrictions came into place in the spring of 2020, that travel became much more difficult. The obviously immediate worry for parents who were expecting babies was whether they would be able to get there for the birth of their children. But I'm really pleased to say that we haven't seen any parents who weren't able to do that. And we work with really top attorneys in the US, and one in particular who spearheaded the way through of getting a special exemption to be able to travel even when that travel ban was in place. So obviously now those travel restrictions have lifted in the last few weeks. So we're starting to see parents being able to plan to go out there at an earlier stage of the journey as well, which is making things easier. But obviously one of the big blocks during COVID was also the fact that for most parents, you need to go out to the US to leave your sperm or to create your embryos, and that wasn't possible at that stage. So we did some lobbying of the HFEA, which is the regulator here, that previously had a policy that said that clinics had to be careful about not exporting genetic material for commercial surrogacy overseas. But as a result of our efforts, they've now changed that policy in October last year, so that there is no block on exporting material for surrogacy overseas if you're planning to enter into a commercial arrangement. So this is one of the areas where it's had a lasting effect, because those rules have now been changed permanently. and that will enable parents to have more flexibility around how they manage the treatment, whether they can have sperm, for example, collected here and sent over there, or whether they want to travel out there. So it gives that flexibility and choice, which I think is really positive. In terms of the issues around getting home and getting passports, we faced some difficulties during COVID because the US passport service was largely shut, and it was taking a very long time to get US passports for babies, which is traditionally the way that parents travel home. But we managed to lobby the government here to put in place a special emergency UK passport process. So we were able to expedite applications and get babies home. And that, gave us that stopgap during the time when it was difficult to get US passports. It's much simpler if your baby is born in the States to apply for an American passport. The process is much less complicated than applying for a UK passport. But it means we've got that backup emergency process if there's ever anything else in the future that gets in the way of being able to apply for an American passport. So again, that's a really useful thing to have in our back pocket if we need it. And finally, in relation to parental orders, so the court process that you go through, and Simon explained earlier about how his court hearing was held remotely, and that's still the way things are working. So we're having court hearings on Microsoft Teams. I've got one tomorrow for some parents that have a little girl who was born in the States, and it's very convenient for parents, and particularly those who are British but live overseas. So we're hoping that there will be more flexibility from the court around those sorts of things in the future. Although we do miss the kind of celebration element of the hearings when we have them in person, when the family can have pictures taken with the judge and so on. That is all kind of very positive and moving in a good direction. The last thing I would say about the impact of COVID is just on timescales, and I know Stephen touched on this earlier, but all of these problems and restrictions have definitely kind of deterred parents from embarking on surrogacy journeys if they hadn't already started that process over the last year. So what we're now seeing as things start to open up again is a lot of pent-up demand and lots of intended parents who want to start on those journeys. So we are seeing the wait times for matches with surrogates in the US increase from what they were before. So if you have been waiting to get going on your journey, I wouldn't wait too long to get started, because you may find that there's more of a wait than perhaps is ideal. But hopefully that will settle down again in the months and years ahead. So it just gives you a flavour, I guess, of kind of how things are working at the moment and kind of what we're expecting going forward. But surrogacy, has been possible in the US throughout the pandemic, and it is getting easier once again. The other thing I wanted to just update you all on as a kind of topical issue is law reform in the UK. And as some of you may know, there is currently a project going on by the Law Commission, which is the independent body that reviews laws which are considered to be out of date and makes recommendations to the government about how they should be updated. And the Law Commission has been working on a surrogacy reform project for the last 3 years, and produced some proposals that were provisional proposals a couple of years ago. And we are just waiting for their final report to come out, which should be in the early part of next year. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. So those proposals were on the whole very progressive. They're looking at supporting surrogacy in a better way, but they mainly focus on changing the law around surrogacy in the UK. So there will be a new pathway to parenthood here, where parents, if they have taken sensible steps before conception, will be able to be named on the birth certificate of their child without needing to go through this court process of applying for a parental order. So in terms of kind of the impact that has on international surrogacy, I think we hope that it will encourage more women to come forward as surrogates in the UK, but I don't think it's going to have an instantly transformative effect. So, I'm sure that international surrogacy will remain popular because of the access to, professional services by which surrogates are screened, and those match times are more predictable. The other thing to say is that what the Law Commission is currently proposing is that surrogates in the UK would have a right to change their mind, if you like. So the rights will not be quite so secure as they are in the US, where typically you would sign an agreement with your surrogate, which is then recognised in law. So you are the legal parents throughout the process and from the moment of conception. So for those reasons, I think US surrogacy will continue to remain popular. And the law reform has really focused on facilitating UK surrogacy rather than international surrogacy. I think the hope among policymakers is that, if UK surrogacy flourishes, not so many people will need to go overseas. So there aren't any major changes proposed to those going overseas. So the Law Commission has suggested that the government is able to designate a list of countries from which surrogacy arrangements would be recognised, and that's similar to how the law works in relation to international adoption. But it puts us in quite an uncertain position because we don't know if the government will ever exercise that power to say which countries surrogacy arrangements can be recognised from, or when that might happen. So in the meantime, what the Law Commission is proposing is that there is very little change to the current system. So parents who go overseas for surrogacy will still need to go through that process of applying for a parental order. So we do a lot of campaigning for positive law reform, and what we are pushing for is firstly for a prompt exercise of that power to recognise particularly US surrogacy arrangements automatically in the UK. But in the meantime, we would like to see bigger changes to the parental order system so that applications will be much simpler and can be made in advance of the birth. So we won't have this kind of long time scale for bringing UK law into line with the US position after the birth. So if you support us in that, and if you're thinking of going to the US for surrogacy, I hope you do. We would encourage you to get involved in the campaign for law reform. You can write to your MP. There's information on our website about how to do that. But particularly after the Law Commission produces its final report next year, because on the back of that, the government will need to decide whether they want to take forward law reform and send that to Parliament. So being able to kind of show that there is real interest and this really does affect families will be really important. So, you know, do let us know. We can help anyone that wants to kind of get involved in the campaign. So that's a very whistle-stop tour through the kind of latest information on UK law. Please do feel free to kind of ask any questions, or we can follow up with you separately. So that's the end of my little speech. If all the people on the panel, if you want to put your cameras on, and then we can field some questions to all of us. And forgive me that I'm both chairing and answering, so juggling a little bit. Dr. Ringler, there's a question for you about how the medical history of surrogates is checked. So I wonder if you can tell us a bit about medical screening for surrogates in the US.
Sure. Once a patient is matched with a surrogate by an agency, we have the agency send me all of our past medical records, past pregnancy records for me to review before I see her in person. So I'm going to review each pregnancy to make sure they were normal, uncomplicated, looking at her laboratory results. As long as her past pregnancies were normal and not high risk in any way, then I will see her in person for a physical exam, uterine evaluation, infectious disease screening, before she's medically cleared for the process.
Thank you. And another question for you about improving, for parents who want to improve the quality of their own eggs or sperm by changing diet and lifestyle and all those kind of recommendations that you made. How long would it take for those things to have an impact on sperm and egg quality?
That's a great question, because it does take some patience. The eggs that we see in the beginning of a menstrual cycle, those follicles on ultrasound started their journey approximately 90 days prior to that. So any impact you want to have is you have to allow at least 3 months, maybe 4 months. The same with sperm. It takes 70 to 90 days to fully mature sperm. So whenever we do any intervention, you have to give several months to see any impact. So it does take some patience.
Yeah, as with lots of other aspects of the process. So it all takes time and patience to go through. So a question for me about parental orders and how the rules work around having paid more than reasonable expenses in the context of US surrogacy. So just to explain, the court in the UK will go through a process of retrospectively authorising any payments that you've made, both to your surrogate and to your agency. When we were first dealing with parental orders in international surrogacy cases in 2008, 2010, that felt like quite a controversial issue. these days there are about 200 international surrogacy cases going through the court, and almost every one of them involves an authorization of payments. So it's very routine. What the court will need to see is a detailed breakdown of the payments that you have made, and they will want to see that you followed a good process working with reputable professionals, that you haven't taken any advantage of your surrogate or exploited her, and that everything you have done has been legal. So in the context of US surrogacy, there's a lot of security around those issues just within the process because of the agency services and the screening and the legal advice that everyone has. And that can be quite different to if you're going through a surrogacy arrangement in a poorer country or a different country where those checks are not in place. So reasonable expenses or having exceeded reasonable expenses is not going to be a significant hurdle in a parental order application, but it is something that you need to kind of deal with in how you present your case to the court, and we can help you with that to make sure it all goes smoothly, but I certainly wouldn't feel too anxious about that. So another question that's come in, I'm going to read this one because it's saying, if total motile sperm count is in the moderate range, but sperm motility is low, will this have a significant effect on embryo creation, or are there other options? So quite a specific question, if that's okay.
No, that's fine. No, I see the numbers. Yeah, the concentration, 21 million, is within the normal range. Normal is greater than 15 million per ml. Motility should be 40% or greater, so 6.8% is fairly low. So with ICSI, ICSI stands for Intracytoplastic Sperm Insemination. This is a technique of assisted fertilization where the embryologist can take a single sperm and inject it into the egg to assist fertilization. We can achieve a near normal fertilization rate of 75%. Now, the potential of that fertilized egg to grow and develop can be impacted by the quality of that sperm. So my concern with low motility is not only that the sperm aren't moving so well, but the quality may be negatively impacted. So I would want a sperm DNA fragmentation test, for example, to see if it's elevated or not. Oftentimes with abnormal sperm parameters, we see increased sperm DNA fragmentation. Now, that can be treated with antioxidants over the course of several months, or there's a new technique. This is a special microchamber called Zymot, where the sperm are passed through this chamber. It's like an obstacle course for sperm, and it'll separate out sperm with lower DNA fragmentation within a sample. Because if a result says high DNA fragmentation, doesn't mean that every single sperm is abnormal. So this will separate out sperm with lower DNA fragmentation. And we just need one sperm per egg. So it gives us enough sperm to inseminate the eggs for that cycle.
Brilliant. So yeah, everybody's case is unique and different, and there are lots of things you can do, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, it's to try to pinpoint the problems, and evaluate to get more data. It would be helpful to see a reproductive urologist to see if they can find a cause for the decreased motility, because that's a significant decrease.
Yeah, thank you. And Simon, I don't know if you're still there. We can't see you. I was going to ask a question kind of more on the personal side of things. I just wondered if you had any kind of tips for parents. So if you kind of think back to, you know, sitting in your first seminar or whatever, what would you say to yourself if you could at that point in time now?
Go for it. You know, don't, because I in hindsight, I spent way too long going through all of the decision-making process and then going through it all again. Is it a good idea? Should I, shouldn't I? You know, if you want to do it, do it. You know, of course, find out as much information as you can. But yeah, just press that green light as soon as you feel that it's something that you want to do, rather than constantly asking yourself too many questions and overthinking it. And yes, there can be some stressful moments through the process, but if you choose the right team to help you, as I did, then that's really the best advice I would give. Just go ahead, press the green for go button, take all the advice you can from all those people that are there to help you. And yeah, don't be scared, because with any luck, you'll find yourself in a few years' time, like me, having a little one here who's about to become 2. And I can tell you it's all worth it, well worth it.
Even if you do have to watch lots of Mr. Tumble.
I know, even then, it's all worth it. Yeah. And even if I end up being a soccer dad, because that's what he wants to do, it'll still all be worth it.
Super. And Stephen, could I go to you for any final thoughts or anything tips you'd like to share with anyone?
I think, yeah, Simon hit the nail on the head. I think having the right information is something that I said at the beginning, and just doing your research. But I think as a parent through surrogacy myself, having the expectations that this is going to take some time, there are going to be some ups and downs, but actually if you've got the right people on board and you're ready for those ups and downs, then they are totally surmountable, and the end result is more than worth any little roller coaster ride, and you can almost enjoy the roller coaster ride at times as well at some points.
Fantastic, brilliant. Well, thank you to all our amazing speakers. Thank you, Dr. Ringler. I know you've got to go on and do all your wonderful clinical work, and you're just starting your day. We're into our evening. Thank you, Simon, for sharing your experience and letting us meet William briefly as well. And Stephen, obviously, it's always a pleasure to be working with you. So we will email everybody with a recording of this if you would like to watch it again, and we'll share Dr. Ringler's slides for the ones that were missed as well. But thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.